Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. I'm here with David from Full Circle Funerals. How you doing, David?
I'm all right. Thanks for having me, Mike.
You're most welcome. So, if you could start us off and give us a bit more background as to exactly who you are, what you do, how long you've been doing it for, please, David.
Yeah, no problem. So I imagine you probably, I mean, I might be wrong, but I'm imagining you probably not had many funeral directors on the
First one, you
spotlight.
have, I
Well, there we
believe.
go. So I'm a funeral director at Full
Yeah.
Circle Funerals, and I'm also our community impact lead. So
Mhm.
my main sort of job day to day is being a funeral director. So the idea that we are there to kind of support the families that are locally around us in Harrogate and other kind of surrounding areas to really create the personal farewells for the people that they love. And my role in that includes kind of arranging and leading the funerals themselves, offering some guidance and kind of practical support about how to do that, and really just kind of creating space for those families to reflect, remember, and honor the person that they loved them in the way that feels right for them. And then
Brilliant.
the community side of stuff that I do,
Sure.
this is something that's kind of grown through the business as we've grown over the past 10
Mhm.
years. Because when we first started, it was all about just getting that really core blueprint right of how to be a really good funeral director. Because I don't come from a funeral director's background, I didn't grow up as a
Okay.
funeral director.
Yeah.
And once we felt like we had really gotten that correct, the next part of what we wanted to do was look at actually how does the sort of general public interact with the topic of death, dying, and bereavement.
Mhm.
And what we'd found was that actually people find it really difficult to find spaces and places to kind of have meaningful conversations and connections around these subjects because it isn't really discussed in
Right.
sort of
Yeah.
polite society. And so a big part of my community hat
Mhm.
is creating those spaces and places. And sometimes that's delivering sort of educational workshops on specific subjects about like kind of what we do behind the
Yeah.
closed doors of a funeral director, inviting people to come in and have a look around while we're delivering these talks. And other times it's about offering more kind of creative bereavement support mechanisms. So, for
Mhm.
example, a little bit later on this year, we work with a really lovely man called Stephen McKenzie who puts on creative writing workshops all
Yeah.
about bereavement. And the idea in those is that it's a free thing that we offer to kind of the public and anyone that wants to come in and feels like doing creative writing to sort of put themselves in touch with that subject matter are more than welcome to come and join us.
Fantastic. That sounds like a really, I don't know, unique element to what you do. It is, yeah. Do other funeral companies provide these kind of services? What is it unique to you? Tell me a bit about that.
That element is definitely unique to us. I think there is other funeral directors out there that do kind of educational talks, because a lot of our industry is very keen, obviously, to make it more accessible for people because
Yeah.
it is something that at the moment in England is an unregulated industry. So I'm not sure if you knew this, but actually schools have Ofsted,
Yeah.
homes and hospitals have the CQC, but even though we are supporting people who have no capacity at all because they've died,
Mhm.
and some people that are really vulnerable because they're bereaved individuals,
Sure.
and there's
Yeah.
finances involved, there isn't actually a governing body which regulates the industry.
Mhm.
And so I think that is something that people find as a bit of a barrier to finding out information, especially when it comes to sort of the levels of quality and approaches and diversity and how different funeral companies kind of operate through the country. And so part of what we wanted to do was really kind of remove the barriers
Yeah.
around that to make it a lot more transparent. So if people do have questions, then they can find the funeral company that they feel like is going to fit their values and ethics because there are so
Sure.
many different approaches out there.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Brilliant. So I really like that kind of approach. So you're enlightening me on the subject, so I'm going to learn a fair bit from this conversation as well. In terms of how you got into this industry, then, tell us a bit more about that. What were you doing before, and how did you get into Full Circle?
Yeah, no problem. So we're in our year of our 10th birthday now as
Yeah,
full circle. So we'll be 10 years old later this year. And
congratulations.
thank you. And prior to this, I used to be the manager of a care home for adults with learning disabilities,
Mhm.
specifically in the challenging behaviour sector. And I did that for about 10 years, actually. And during that time, I was really lucky to meet Sarah Jones, who's the founder of Full Circle Funerals,
Mhm.
and Jade Westgarth. And me, Sarah, and Jade all used to work together within this company. And during that time, we found that unfortunately some of the service users that we were looking after died for different reasons. Um, and that's where we first started to come into contact with different funeral directors. And we
Yeah.
found, as I mentioned before, this kind of real spectrum of approaches and prices and just the different ways that people kind of held the spaces for the families of the person that had died, as well as kind of the community surrounding that
Yeah. Yeah.
person as well. And kind of through that, we found that actually we thought we could deliver something which was much more holistic and care-based and wasn't just about creating an event for somebody, but was
Yeah.
also looking at what happens prior to the funeral taking place, like how visiting someone that has died can be really important and sometimes even more important than the day of the funeral, especially for those that are having unattended funerals these days,
Yeah.
that actually the visit can be something that supersedes everything. And then obviously the event itself is extremely important for a lot of people, but not just for the main mourners, but also the community kind of surrounding that person and all the people that knew and loved them. And then also what happens afterwards. And
Yeah.
that kind of idea of is there ongoing bereavement support and how are funeral directors kind of engaging in the community to make this topic more accessible so it doesn't become something that's only kind of talked about behind closed doors in very specific circumstances.
Brilliant. So there's plenty to potentially go at there because in terms of you starting the business, and we were talking off camera about the sort of plan that you have of executing certain parts of what you do in your mind right before then moving on to expanding out some of the additional ambitions and services that you want to provide. What's the business journey been like to date then, David? If there's one word you could use and then expand out on that.
Oh, one word, that's a tough one. I think
One or
one
two
word
might
to
cover.
describe it's been an adventure, I think, so
Yeah,
far, Mike.
nice.
I mean, I never had plans of becoming a funeral director when I was a young man.
Yeah,
It's only kind of come into my world in the past sort of 15 years.
yeah.
And part of that was because I'd had a couple of personal bereavements as well. So
Mhm.
in my kind of late 20s, I was started to go to friends' funerals and families'
Mhm.
funerals. And that kind of hit home actually, like this affects everybody.
Yeah,
It's the one certain thing in
yeah,
life that you are going to have to deal
yeah.
with at some point. And I think as from the business side of things, it continues to be just a massive learning curve
Mhm.
from every sort of perspective. Because when we first started, we just had our one location in Guiseley,
Mhm.
and we quickly realised that we had, I suppose, hit a niche in the market that people were very interested in.
Mhm.
And we were pleasantly surprised about how successful we were quite quickly within Guiseley. So then we expanded into Leeds, then into Harrogate, and now most recently into Ilkley. Um, and it's been really eye-opening to meet all of the different families that we have over the past kind of 10 years because
Yeah,
it sounds very cliched, but every family is just so different. So we don't ever want to be that kind of there are some funeral directors out there that they sort of operate on like a very templated basis. So you can have your
sure.
bronze package, your silver package, your gold package.
Yeah.
Whereas we've always been of the kind of the ilk that because everyone's so different, they need to be treated as an
Mhm.
individual. And so actually it's coming back to that kind of care analogy that we talked about before.
Yeah.
It's more around kind of creating this jigsaw puzzle of care and like creating a care package for that
Yeah.
family. So everything is very bespoke to them. And that doesn't mean that they have to be spending tons of money because that's not what it's about. It's creating something that's going to be meaningful and kind of fits their needs.
Fantastic. So what are the challenges and opportunities that I suppose one you've faced and two that you see ahead?
So I'd say there's lots of challenges
Hmm.
in terms of this specific industry, but I think one of the main ones is that a lot of people still just don't have a base level of knowledge
Hmm.
around kind of death, dying, and bereavement because people don't want to talk about it. And that's
Yeah.
that whole thing of like, I mean, I even find it in my family with my mum and dad. Like, it's like you're tempting fate if you start to
That
speak.
is, how do you change a culture? That's the you know, that's the
Exactly.
tricky thing. Yeah.
Yeah. But the way that I suppose it's a challenge and an
Yeah.
opportunity. The
Yeah.
fact that lots of people really struggle to talk about the subject, but if we can get out there and really educate people around what are the options and choices, then they can be the ones that make the correct decisions for them and their family, and they'll feel hopefully more empowered to then actually make something which is going to be meaningful rather than just kind of follow the status quo. Because I think I have seen quite a few families over the years that have come into us and we have kind of opened this world up a little bit as
Mhm.
to like there is lots of other options and choices and trying to make something a little bit more with a deeper personal connection rather
Yeah.
than just kind of turning up to this event. And in my experience, that's always been received really well. And
Mhm.
I feel like their grief journey ends up being much better as a result.
Yeah.
Even though it's a hard thing to start, I think if you can manage to kind of penetrate that kind of cultural aversion of talking about the subject, it's really
Yeah.
beneficial to the people that it affects.
Brilliant. Would this be a fair comparison? As a, I don't know, something that came up listening to you then was, is it more, I suppose, like a wedding orientation in terms of how it's bespoke and what the people want from the experience of obviously bereavement and kind of saying their goodbyes compared to say, as you said, that formulaic bronze, silver, gold opportunity would you may say no, but I don't know, is that a fair kind of, because sometimes it's a lot easier to compare to say it is like the X of X and people can instantly understand that a bit more. Is
I'd
that
say that's a fair analogy, Mike.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example.
Mhm.
So something that I didn't realize that you could do prior to kind of
Yeah.
starting this whole journey was that you don't have to have a funeral in a church or a crematorium.
Hmm.
You can have them anywhere. So
Yeah.
there's no rules or regulations or laws which says that you must have a funeral in a church or a crematorium. And
Yeah.
so as soon as you start to expand into other venues, so
Hmm.
we've had people have funerals at home, we've had them use village halls, hotels, like all sorts of different venues, sometimes outside in marquees. Excuse me. And as soon as you start to break that boundary,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
all sorts of other creative ideas start to come in as a result. And so we've had, I'm actually sat in one of our showrooms right now, and we've had families use cardboard coffins as like an artistic base. So they've
Yeah.
had like an entire evening where they've come in and drawn pictures and written messages and decorated these coffins. So then on the day, they've got this
Yeah.
bespoke piece of art, which is like housing the person that they love for that ceremony.
Yeah.
And there's, yeah, as soon as you start to kind of open the box a little bit in terms of what can be done, some people really then jump into it and create things which are incredibly, like, have incredibly deep connections. And I think weddings is a good analogy because no one likes to think that their wedding is the same as anybody else's.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to think that it's unique in some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
Um, and I like to think that actually that can be the same for funerals. It doesn't need to be a
Yeah.
copy
I,
of
I
something
kind
else.
of opened a connection up in my mind then of like, I really get the what you're doing and the opportunity in the space to one, help people with the situation, and two, break down the barriers, I suppose, to cultural kind of habits around
Yeah.
the experience of a funeral and saying goodbye to loved ones. So yeah, it really makes sense. So thank you for sharing that. That's great. In terms of your biggest lesson then, David, so far with doing what you do over the last 10 years, is there one that you can share that stands out?
Yeah, I think the biggest one for me is it's about listening.
Hmm.
And I've always been a pretty natural talker. And whenever I've gone into kind of social situations or professional ones, I've always been, I've never been shy, Mike, put it that way. Um, and one of the things that I've learned most over the past 10 years, especially in supporting families,
Mhm.
is allowing the space for people to process and think without extra information being inputted. Because although there is lots of exciting new choices and options, like we've just been discussing about kind of creating these really personal and in-depth ceremonies, sometimes that's not what everybody wants. And
Sure.
actually being able to create something that holds a lot of, let's say, traditional value in how it is created, and that idea of culture being kind of engraved and set in stone, that can be really important for some people.
That is a really fair point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's not about pushing your agenda or what you think they want. It's about kind of just laying out these options and choices and then allowing space within these meetings to really allow people to process things in their own time. And so sometimes that's meant that actually we haven't created everything in one meeting. It's been done over multiple days, sometimes over multiple weeks. And we don't want to force that. We want to kind of let that organically grow, because if you do
Sure.
try and force it, that's when things end up going in a direction that no one really wants.
Yeah, it's not a natural formulation of your service, which I think is your USP if you're putting it into a USP, I guess.
Part of
Um,
it, definitely.
in terms of your inspiration then to do what you do, uh, covered a few things here, but kind of in your own words, why do you continue and have plans for your business to want to do what you do?
I think what inspires me most, and it sounds really cheesy, but it's just true.
Mhm.
It's the privilege of supporting people at one of the most important moments in their lives.
Mhm.
And I don't think people, unless you've been through a bereavement before that's close and significant to you, I
Mhm.
don't think people quite understand the level of um, how it's going to hit them until they're in that
Sure.
moment. And because it is something that it's not a, let's say, a regular purchase that happens in people's lives, you
Yeah.
might only arrange one or two funerals in your entire life.
Mhm.
If you're lucky, it might be
Yeah.
more. Um, Being trusted to care for someone that's died and kind of guide the family through that is something that I'm never going to take lightly.
Yeah, yeah. There won't be many people in the world that get that kind of responsibility.
Yeah.
That's a nice share. Thank you. So in terms of just before we wrap up, the last question, if you were to give yourself a bit of advice in hindsight, say meeting yourself at 18, David, what would that bit of advice be?
Oh, that's a good one. So I think in terms of the business side of stuff, I've got different advice for me if it was on a
Yeah, yeah.
personal level. But the business side of stuff, it'd be really take the time to get to know your community and create positive and strong relationships with the people and businesses around you. Because you never know where your journey's going to go. And having a really strong connection to you, the kind of local people that
Mhm.
you may use as a business, sort of create collaborations with, is just absolutely invaluable.
Brilliant. Good share. Thank you. So then lastly, if people would like to get in touch with you or if you've got any latest news you'd like to share, so people can get in contact or follow it in any way, what's the best way for you to share that?
Yes, we've got a couple of different platforms. We've got our website, obviously, which is fullcirclefunerals.co.uk. If you just want to get in touch directly with me, you can email me at david@fullcirclefunerals.co.uk. Or if you want to ring and have a chat, you can get through on our Harrogate branch number. So that's 01423 740 799. And then finally, we have a number of free events, webinars, kind of all the educational bits and pieces and creative bereavement support workshops that I'd mentioned. And they
Yeah,
can all be found on our Eventbrite page. So if you just type in Full Circle Funerals and Eventbrite, you'll see everything that we've got posted for the rest of this year.
brilliant. We'll list as many things as we can in the description under the video when we release that for you. David, absolute pleasure talking with you, and I wish you all the best for yeah, continuing to do what you do and I suppose changing the industry in your own way.
Thanks, Mike. It's been a pleasure.